in the afternoon, with a good deal of grumbling and cursing in a weird camel's tongue, the caravans prepared to start. Camels are still the desert's only regular means of communication and transport, and the camels should by now be pretty well resigned to it. But who never grumbles at the beginning of a day's work? Their knees have been hobbled all day, and it probably hurts to stretch the leg. Often these caravans, slowly plodding their way across the sands, make a scene of breathtaking beauty. The sands are never still. The slightest breeze lifts and carries a fine golden powder which comes rippling down the sides of the dunes and slowly, in the course of centuries, alters their outline. Old Saharians tell you the dunes are smoking, and they refer to the light fringe of sand which the wind is blowing off the top of the dunes, too often a forerunner of terrifying and disastrous sandstorms. In every one of these oasis outposts, the French have a garrison of colonial troops. It is a marvelous sight to see these horsemen galloping by in their brilliant uniforms, mounted on Arabian horses, especially trained to the soft sand of the desert. Their officers are the finest men of the French army, inured as hard as their men to the long marches under a burning sun and to the thirst of the desert. It is not many years since the desert was infested with lawless bands of Tuareg pillagers, and these lonely outposts were in constant danger of attack. This very one stood a heroic and bloody siege. As strict discipline as that of the finest cavalry schools of Europe prevails here, many hundreds of miles from France, among these hard-bitten desert men. And we are now leaving the last of the road behind us. Before us stretches the desert, hundreds of miles of sand and gravel, sometimes firm and smooth so that we can make good time, sometimes perfectly hard under a thin covering of soft sand, sometimes soft and without bottom under a thin hard crust which suddenly gives way under the wheels. There is in the Sahara every kind of sand, and weeks of experience will not teach you where a surface which is to all appearances hard will unexpectedly give way. The dreaded rotten earth is the worst, as fluid and slippery as talcum powder. Sometimes as we shoveled and sweated, a camel caravan would pass, and how scornfully the camels would look at us. They had no 6-ton load to carry, however, and no 4-ton trailer to pull. We had been many times assured that the attempt to pull a 4-ton trailer across the Sahara was lunacy, and I came close to believing it. With their terrible overload, the Dodge trucks took almost unbelievable punishment. Remember that they did this day after day for hundreds of miles in a temperature of 120 to 130. Our progress was at times dishearteningly slow. On our worst day, we did less in 12 hours, less than 100 yards. And then, sometimes when we least expected it, the wheels would suddenly bite, pull out. We would change into second, into high, creep up to 35 and 40. The secret of Sahara driving is at all costs keep up speed on tires deflated to less than half normal pressure. Every 100 miles or so, I would look for a hard patch on which it would be safe to stop, and I would signal the trucks for a quick inspection of motors and tires and refueling. Aside from spare tires, we used 60 tires on the whole trip and half a ton of spare parts which we never needed and never used. The trailer carried 400 gallons of gasoline for the first leg of the desert crossing, and we planned to abandon it after this first leg. There was little to vary the monotony of the trip. Tracks in the sand of a previous French military expedition told us we were on the right road. We drank water, 2.5 gallons of water per day per person, the regulation allowance in the desert. and yet a consuming thirst parched our throats, which no amount of drinking could satisfy. I had been in dread of sandstorms, and one day it was upon us. We were 200 miles from shelter, but we felt our sealed engines with their air and oil filters would get us through. We went on. For 4 days a burning wind carried millions of tons of sand across the face of the desert. For 4 days we choked, breathed sand, ate sand, rubbed at our inflamed eyes. Driving in the choking atmosphere of the trucks, filled with inches of fine dust which every bump would raise in a blinding cloud, became agony. The mechanism of our cameras filled with sand and they refused to work. But our Dodge engines carried on, mile after mile, until at last we reached shelter. We opened the motors to see if they had suffered from the sandstorm, and we found that they hadn't. For 2 more days the scorching wind blew, changing the face of the desert and obliterating all trace of our passage. We were now picking up our supplies for the second leg of the trip. From now on we were to give up our comfortable Pullman installations in the trucks. The trailer discarded, we were filling the trucks to the roof with cases of gasoline, long ago sent here for us by camel caravans. Every item was to be checked over and over. Food and water for 20 days. 300 gallons of water. The greater part of the desert still lay before us. But we felt we were veterans of the Sahara, and that nothing would stop us. 1¼ tons of gasoline in each truck. From now on, we would sleep on the ground. We had given the little boys cigarettes and pennies, and they hated to see us go. But the town was preparing to give us a send-off in the manner of the Sahara. As we drove, the crowd around us grew. Soon the sand and gravel kicked up by the flying hoofs of the horses made me fear for our windshields. In the heavy sand, we tried vainly to overtake the furiously galloping horses. Again alone. Truck number 2 was freed at last from its heavy trailer. The motors hummed cheerfully. The road was straight, level, and without turnings. Traffic was too scarce to bother us. No speed limit and no cops. I want to show you one of our camps. This is breakfast time just at sunrise. The temperature is not 120 now, it is around 40. And has been well below freezing during the night. We have slept on cots with all available blankets. But in the cold air and before the thermometer begins to climb, the sand is appreciably firmer than it will be during the day. And the start at sunrise will give us several hours of easier going. The temptation was always strong to drive at night, but each time we attempted it, being unable to gauge the firmness of the surface, we got hopelessly bogged in sand and lost much more time than we gained. But vegetation is again beginning to appear. In the distance we see nomads, their herds of goats and camels. We are approaching one of the wells. We have been warned against having anything to do with the Tuaregs at the wells, because an epidemic of smallpox is raging among them. But our drinking water has been put in gasoline drums, and after a week of drinking gasoline water, gasoline tea, gasoline coffee, and gasoline soup, we long for fresh water. Also the herds of goats and donkeys, the colorful desert people, make too picturesque a sight to resist. We have soon made friends with the Tuaregs. I grouped two of the prettiest girls for a picture. Here in the desert, they do not insist on hiding their faces as they would in the towns. Our cleanest cans are filled with water. It is cloudy and it has a strong alkaline taste. And alas, as we soon find, it has strong medicinal properties. But it is a lovely change after gasoline. The camels like it, and each take their normal week's supply, 40 to 50 gallons. It takes many refillings of the goat skin to water a herd of camels. The babies have to start very young. This one was born this morning, but already he has to be taught to take his fill of water, so that on the long march he will not be too much of a drain on the mother. Baby camels are lovely, white, woolly things, but they are all wrists and elbows and seem terribly ill at ease and unable to cope with this complicated world. Another 200 miles done easily in 2 days. We are now in a Tuareg stronghold in a hogger. We are guests at the court of King Ephemeral, the king of the Tuareg. This massive man rules over a territory almost as large as the United States. For us, the court orchestra plays. For us, the king's followers dance the traditional stick dance of the Tuareg. No reputable woman would thus unveil her face, and I am told in whispers that these women are shameless. Greater honor, the king also displays his camels. They are priceless animals, and they are made to pace before us, gorgeously saddled, their heads held high, their legs moving in an odd rhythm, stiff and stately. And now we are on the last leg of the desert crossing. Scanty yellow grass begins to appear. We are approaching Niamey on